Previous lesson, we looked at how we can write out some text, and as long as we call the file 8.html, it actually renders out in the browser. So it actually renders out that content that we've placed within our file. And this is a very simple format, and it's very straightforward. But if we want to actually have the browser understand the meaning of the file, we need to add in some additional structure into our HTML document. And this is where all of the source files and source code comes in. So when you look at any web page, we see that generally they're going to start out in the same type of format. So you see over here they've got something called doctype.html. It's a little bit grayed out here. And what this is doing is this is simply allowing the browser to understand what type of document type it is. And basically this doc type indicates that this is an HTML5 document, and also helps the browser understand that it should expect HTML5 content here. So we want to start out all of our web pages, all of our HTML pages within that same way. We want to write doc type and HTML. And you'll find that all of the web pages, when you go to the source code, you're going to see the same type of structure. And then the next thing that we see is it's an opening HTML tag, and then when we go right to the bottom, the last thing that we're going to see is a closing HTML tag. So that basically means that any of the content that's between these two tags that's nested in between here is going to be that HTML content. And this is for the browser to understand that this is HTML and this is what needs to get rendered out. So even if you put content outside of the HTML, it'll still render that out. And even if you don't include the doc type, it'll still render that out. It'll just assume that's an HTML document because the extension's HTML. But you want to start out with a good structure, and this is really going to help you when you take a look at the file and understand how it's structured with the layout that you're expecting the file to be rendered out as. So the next thing that we see within any web page, so I'm just using this Notepad one as an example, but pretty much any web page, and we see there's a whole bunch of JavaScript and additional content in here as well. So we're going to briefly go over that stuff, but the next one that we see is head. So this is typical of HTML documents where we open it up with an HTML, we close it up with an HTML, we open up head, and then, so what do you think that we do next? We close off head. So it's basic HTML is a structure of opening and closing tags. So there's also tags that don't need to be closed. So they're not what's called self-closing tags, and we're going to be going over some of those later on. But for now, the majority of the tags that we're going to be looking at are going to have this opening and closing, and any of the content in between here is going to be considered that content that belongs in that file, in that structure of the HTML file. So HTML opens, HTML closes, head opens, head closes, and here we have body opening and body closing. So body indicates the content that we actually want the user to be able to see. So anything contained within body is what we generally want to output for the user's visibility. And we see in the top here in head, the only one that the user should be able to see is the title within head. So again, this is another opening and closing tag. And when I save title, what title does is, or within the head, this is where all of that contents about how and information, what needs to be rendered out goes. So if you've got, you see we've got our styling up here, we've got some meta tags, we've got the character set, so we've got all of this meta information in the head. And then we also have title. And title is actually something that the user can see, and it's really important to set a good title for your pages for SEO purposes as well. So when I enter in a title, I'm just going to call it my new page, save it, and now when I go out to this file, we see here by default there's no title, so it just gives us the file name. But when I refresh it, we see that it says my new page, because now it understands that, well, this is the title that we want to set within our HTML structure, and that's why it understands that anything between the title area gets rendered out as the my new page up here in the tab section of your browser. So just to summarize what we've gone over within this lesson, and it's simply that HTML is a series of opening and closing tags. And one of the good things about Notepad is that we've got these plus and minuses, so we can open and close those tags. So it helps us better understand how those tags are being structured. So on a basic level, we've got our HTML opening, HTML closing, and all of our HTML content in between there. And as well, we've got our head opening, closing, title opening and closing, and any of the content that we want to render out within this particular set of tags gets placed nested in between them. And the same thing for body. So our entire body content that we want to display out gets nested between opening and closing body tags. So in the next set of lessons, we're going to actually look deeper into different types of tags that we can use within our HTML, and we're also going to look at some tags that don't have this type of format where we've got opening and closing. And these are going to be typical of tags that don't necessarily contain any content in between them, and such as when we're doing line breaks. So we're going to look at those later on within this course as well. But for now, most of the tags that we're going to be looking at are going to have the same type of structure where we're opening and closing them. The content in the middle is what content is deemed to be rendered within that section of that HTML structure.